Thank you, everybody, for being here on this Monday afternoon. Thank you to Netflix and, of course, to the Guild of Music Supervisors. As Joel said, I'm Jazz Tangcay and just thrilled to be back here because these shows are some of the best shows on TV right now with the best music and needle drop. So I'm thrilled to dive in. And don't forget, if you've got questions, please feel free to send them in the chat because we're going to, try and incorporate them over the next hour. So let me go ahead and introduce this amazing group of panelists. We have from Bridgerton, Alex Patsavas. From Master of None, we have Zach Cowie. From Halston, we have Amanda Krieg Thomas. And from Emily in Paris with Brienne Rose. Hello and welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hello.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. I'm sure everybody out there is really excited to just hear about the music of your shows. The thing is, they're all so different. And, I'd love to hear what the approach was to the music for the series. So Alex, I'm going to start with you, Bridgerton. Talk about how you approached the music.
It's such a big question, always such a big question, but really can be distilled. For me anyway, I had the good fortune of having had worked with Chris Van Dusen, Shonda Rhimes and Betsy Beers since the Grey's Anatomy pilot. So almost 20 years of developing a shorthand and thinking about what the music of Bridgerton would be and how we would honor the Regency time period, but also make it accessible to the modern viewer, and really more than anything, make sure we fit in seamlessly with Chris Bauer's beautiful score. It was a long process. We started shooting in the summer of 2019, posted at the beginning of the pandemic, and always a journey finding the music, but that's sort of the essence of it.
I love that. And Zach has only done 10 of these Zoom panels over the course of the past year. I don't know how you got so lucky.
10 Zooms, period. I don't like this stuff. But I do anything to talk to you people. But yeah, I was joking earlier. I just like talking on the phone, and whenever people send me a Zoom invite, I was like, can we talk on the phone? And I've managed to dodge a lot of these. But,
well, we're excited to have you here today and honored. But yeah, what was your approach for Master of None season 3?
It was silence. So it's a small group of people that work on this show, and we're all really tight in real life, not just at work. And after season 2, when ideas for season 3 started to start bubbling up, like Aziz kind of proposed a bunch of kind of creative rules to sort of establish the formula that made season 2 work, and see if we could make season 3 without using a single one of those things. And that was terrifying to some people, but I was very into it. So the musical direction, since season 1 and 2 was just packed with music, season 3 was an experiment in saying less, or saying more with less. So we've got like 13 songs in the whole season, where most episodes in season 2 had like 20 in each. So yeah, silence.
I love that. We're going to dive into that later on. Amanda, what about the conversations you had with Brian Murphy for Halston and how you were going to approach this incredible series?
Yeah, well, I'm a longtime collaborator with the team, with Ryan, with Alexis Martin Woodall, who's an executive producer and also very, very hands-on with the music. And so the beginning, it started with a lot of just playlists, and then it's the way that they kind of work, where we're all pitching ideas, and that's Ryan, that's Alexis, that's Dan Minahan, the director, the editors are pulling. I mean, they're all Ryan shows are a little bit of an all hands on deck situation and like best idea wins. And so we were all, like, Dan was sending Spotify playlists, Alexis had a bunch, I was pulling together ideas. And so then it was just finding the right songs for the scenes as they kind of came together. And I think anybody can sort of attest that oftentimes what starts on the script, on the page in the script, takes a totally different vibe once scenes are shot, once things are come together, once the pacing and the tone of an overall project sort of finds its way. So at that point, yeah, it's a lot of just finding what feels right with all of those things sort of in mind, and just a lot of times being like, this just really works. I don't quite know why, but it's the winner, and like we have to figure it out and clear it and make it happen. So yeah, it's really kind of all over the place, but I think it was one of those tones where everybody sort of like knew it when we had it, when a song worked, for sure.
Love that. And Brienne, what about for Emily in Paris? What was your approach to this series?
My Francophile heart. I am just obsessed with France and French culture in general. So that was an easy entree into that universe. And it's just always been a hobby of mine to find French bands and cool Parisian labels and things like that. So that was an immediate just love that I had for that world and that show. So that was sort of our jumping off point, was talking about what we wanted the show to feel like and what we wanted Emily's world to feel like. So it was a lot of figuring out how those two pieces fit together, because they're not the same thing. Paris feels very different from Emily's experience of Paris. So we had to do our best to fuse those two things together and make them fit into something that felt authentic, but also, theatrical in a way. So I think our goal was always to capture both of those things and fuse them together.
Love that. And I'm going to go back to Alex. The Vitamin String Quartet. I mean, the show has been immensely successful. The same, with the music streams on, across the charts. Talk about finding the Vitamin String Quartet and why they were the perfect band to bring the music to the series.
Well, I think before we even went into production, we talked a lot about, as I said before, like what the source would be, and really focused on instrumentals and modern instrumentals. And that included Max Richter, it included Sufjan Stevens, but also, we really did a big search for iconic quartet covers, quartet covers of really modern iconic pop songs, and gathered many versions of these songs. Obviously, the Vitamin String has had a huge impact in that space, but additionally, Chris Bowers actually covered Strange for us later on in the episodes, and they just, have always done these versions so well. There's something so compelling about not hearing the lyrics, hearing a beautifully played orchestral version of a song that and I think that wink was really important to Chris Van Dusen, to Betsy Beers, to Shonda Rhimes, having a scene play where the viewer would hear the lyrics in their head, but not actually hear them on screen.
Love that. So Zach, when, and you touched on this earlier, when Aziz Ansari says to you, okay, we're going to do season 3, but this time I want less music. I want it to be quiet. What was your reaction when he said that?
Well, I was really into it because, I'm a music freak, clearly, but I'm also a big fan of silence. And one of my heroes is a composer and kind of music thinker named John Cage. And I brought props. Did anybody else bring props? This is a book that he wrote on silence that I absolutely love, that your coworker Shirley Halperin's husband gave me this book, Tom Monahan, about 10 years ago. So I am all for silence and trying to kind of just be I don't know, just it's very easy to what do they say sometimes in the edit, like, can we save this with music? Has anybody ever heard that before? It's a thing that we all know how to do, and I got very excited at the idea of trying to kind of take it all away and see if we can keep this thing standing up. And for that reason, we have no composer. Almost all the music you hear in this season is diegetic, except for the intros and outros. And all of the intros and outros are by the same musician. Another prop, opera singer named Jesse Norman. So yeah, I was into it.
I mean, I want to put that question out to everybody, what Zach just said about finding that balance between music and silence. Like, when do you know enough? You know, when do you know to pull back? Like, talk about the challenge or the skill of holding back. Brienne, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes such a beautiful impact when you can leave space for a song to really breathe and just live. It's just I think it's such a gift as a music supervisor to be able to do that. Like, just watching that, Zach, I was like, oh, just how beautiful that they just let the song play, and like, you could just enjoy it. You could enjoy the song and it elevates the scene so much, but it's these two beautiful pieces coming together and just working so well. So I think it's just, you know, as a music supervisor, that's a dream position to be in, is like to have the space and just ability to let that breathe. Like, it, you know.
I have to add, I'm super lucky on this show. I'm actually I'm a consulting producer as well as the music supervisor. So I get to be there at the very, very beginning when the scripts are being written. So, you know, a lot of why that scene kind of like works the way it does is we always knew it would be that song, because I was pitching against the scripts as they were being generated. And as you all know, it makes such a difference to know what you're shooting to versus trying to find something to put in there later. To the point, like, that's actually being played on that stereo in there. Like,
That's great.
which my friend Anish and I built. That we put the system together on set, and the cast used it the whole time to play records in between all the setups.
Wow. Amanda, what about for you? Like, how do you find that balance between music, silence, and letting a song breathe or letting a moment breathe?
Well, you know, it's interesting that, you know, Zach being like, you know, if we all heard that, like, save it with music. And, you know, I always kind of find myself in the position being like, it doesn't need to be saved with music. And like, directors and producers so often will be like, let's try a song here. And like, I feel like people think that supervisors are the ones probably wanting to find every song moment and like make everything a song moment. But I feel more often than not that I end up being the one saying, like, do we really need it? And then oftentimes it's sort of like, it's an emotion, and or like either it's an emotion that is clearer when it's silent. Sometimes like silence really, you know, if you're like, oh, well, this is a really awkward scene, or if it's a really this, like putting a song in there just like tramples all over anything you're trying to do. And dialogue is the same way. Like, again, to Bree's point, like how amazing it is to watch that and just see like, oh my gosh, the song is just speaking for the scene. And those moments are also pretty rare, because yeah, what we're doing a lot is like, how do we make the most out of the song, but also never losing sight of what the story is and what the moment is. And that's another time where like silence, you know, we end up pitching silence, if you will, is if you're like, that idea, you know, this dialogue is super important, it's an important story point, or it's an important like beat between two characters. Those are that idea comes up, I feel like, very often, where I'm like, a song here won't work because of this because it does that, does this. And so I often honestly find myself pitching silence more often than I think most people assume a music supervisor does. And then, you know, yeah, like the flip side of it is then sort of always thinking like, if I'm going to pitch, if I'm going to say yes, you know, whether it's my idea or a showrunner or a producer saying, I want a song here, saying, okay, well, how do I like be the one saying like, okay, we got to figure this and this out, because the song moment has to, we can't lose track of the story here. And like, whether that's like getting an instrumental or getting the vocal only stem, and just always thinking like, how do we, or editing the song, like, okay, well, let's try doing this and looping this instrumental to make sure that the story is always, is never lost, is never lost in whatever you're choosing to do. But yeah, I mean, silence is oftentimes very important in,
Would we
in
say it's
emotion and
golden?
story.
It is.
Silence is golden. Didn't get there. Thank you, Brie.
Alex, did you want to add to that? Like finding a
I
balance
think I
between
have
music?
very little that's additive at this point, but I mean, obviously silence is really powerful. But one thing to keep in mind, I think, is so often it's a producer or director decision as far as like what they want the music signature to be. And is it mostly score? Is it sort of songs as score? Is it, as Zach was saying, like this very intentional silent world where you know, songs were used very specifically and very briefly. And I think as supervisors, we are responding to that brief and trying to sort out, you know, what we're doing within that creative vision. But silence super powerful for sure.
That's a really good point. And since we have 212 people listening to us, I can't like overemphasize that you know, every time that we get stuck in one of these situations, the sound for the thing presents itself, and this silence thing like wouldn't work on a lot of other shows. It's very specific to this moment and the way we wanted this thing to look. Like, you know, the silence in the music is kind of the same thing as the camera not moving, and you know, everything taking place in just a couple of locations. So yeah, it's all specific to the project, and we don't know till we get there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, now we're going to jump to Halston. Wow, Krista Rodriguez is incredible as Liza Minnelli, and that's such a great moment. Talk about why you picked that song, and also that moment where it just fades out to a whisper and then rises again. Like,
oh my goodness. Well, so a few things. One of the reasons I picked this, first of all, is that like one of the things that I've done often for Ryan Murphy is the on-camera performances, which it was this. I mean, we created this track from scratch based on a couple references, and recorded Krista during COVID and like the whole 9 yards. And the song, and it's also a good example of how things change from a script concept to execution. And so this song actually, it was scripted, and it was scripted because it was the actual song that Liza Minnelli performed at the Battle of Versailles fashion show. And that is a whole wild, amazing story. And like Liza actually was like, she was best friends with Halston. She actually recorded the vocals of this in New York and like lip synced on the day in the 70s in this like moment. And so initially, as it was scripted, it was this song, and then like the fashion show, and then another song is in real life. This song started it, and then there were two other songs that she performed throughout the American section of this fashion show. And as it sort of evolved, it just felt like, as the song was recorded and it kind of took shape, it felt like this was the piece that was going to just from start to finish encapsulate the American section, that they were like, we don't need any other songs. And And so then it was really important to get it right. And it took a lot of mixes and passes, and like the choreographer had certain little beats that she wanted like hit and punctuated. So we had to go back a bunch of times and be like, this needs to stand out more, that needs to stand out, for that hit needs to match what the choreographer needs for this. And then it was really in post that it became that. And like, I really want to give a lot of credit to Alexis Martin Woodall, who's I think who I mentioned earlier, who's an executive producer, but also is just super involved in the music and just has a really good sense of musical storytelling. And it like you see it on every Ryan show. She's really heavily involved. And it was, credit to her for sort of taking the song and then like letting the story and how Dan's visuals and how the story all evolved and creating that moment where the score drops out and Halston having that realization. And I think it all like, came together in a story way and really well. So yeah, so it was a challenging one on a lot of fronts because it needed to do a lot of heavy lifting. But it was really fun. And yes, Krista is incredible and is just like a Broadway talent that it makes my job 10 times easier to be like, please sing a song. And there you go. She just comes in and sings it and crushes it from the beginning.
She absolutely does. And Brienne, I want to talk about Emily in Paris. And, you talked about like the two themes of the series. You've got Emily's theme and the Parisian theme, which, as you said, just taps into the Francophile within.
Okay. So Emily's world, because she came from the Midwest and was a very sweet, very cheery, like happy person, that it like her music is more of like a pop forward, bright kind of sound. But Paris to me always sounds very like vintage and 60s, and like that yay pop sound always feels so Parisian to me. So it was really infusing those two things together and finding the balance there. And Paris also is so cool that we just had to dip into some of those cool Parisian bands that exist.
That is such a great moment. I think this is a great question that I saw in the chat and that I also wanted to ask. Like, how do you decide as music supervisors whether to use like the chorus or like a verse? Like, talk about finding that moment.
Yeah, I guess I'll start since we just finished. Yeah, I think it's really circumstantial. Every moment really calls for something different. So there are certainly times where you'll listen to a song, and I know everyone's process is different. Usually I'll be watching a cut and I'll try different things over the top. And there's a lot of detailed notes that go into, all right, we're going to start the song here, and then we're going to edit. We're going to jump to 32 seconds in, and then we're going to use 10 seconds of that, and then we're going to jump. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes an editor will lay something in. Love the editors, but sometimes they'll just lay something in. It's like, no, that's not how it was supposed to be. So I think that can be a little bit of a frustration or a frustrating process, because you'll imagine a song plays a certain way, and it doesn't always end up that way, but sometimes it does. So it really, I think it's circumstantial depending on the scene and what it calls for.
Sat, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it is. It's totally circumstantial. I think the one thing that because I do the same thing, like I'm messing around at home, chopping stuff up. I write like psycho letters to editors that are like this long about what to do with 13 seconds. And I think that the number one thing I always try and avoid, though, because you asked about like a chorus versus a verse and all that, I have a tough time with what I call say. So when there's something on screen and it's so clear what is being communicated, it drives me crazy when the lyric matches that. Because you kind of don't need to say the same thing twice, like between what's happening with the actors and what the music's doing. So a lot of times I'm like dodging verses and dodging choruses. But every once in a while, you get something that's just totally open, and you can put a direct message in there. But yeah, it's the kind of the thrill of this job is you never really know until it's right. And you're just sitting there messing with it till you figure it out.
Yeah. Alex?
I was just thinking, I remember the days when you could not get an instrumental. And so, you know, there was no, you know, there was no mix available for really zhuzhing those 13 seconds, and
Alex, what did you do?
prayed, you know. It was just, you know, sometimes it was available, you'd go back to the artist, but it just wasn't rote like now, where you can always sort of find that instrumental. And I think, as everybody said already, every instance is circumstantial. Sometimes it's the chorus that works, sometimes it's the silence that works, you know, and sometimes it's the intro. And I've found that over the years that like a great intro is really a big seller, you know, to get into a show. But really it's how I think all of us are looking at it holistically, like how does it all fit together, and what makes the most sense for the scene. But I'm excited we have instrumentals now, that's for sure.
Not everything. For aspiring supervisors who are watching, there are many eras of music where we can't
That's
get
true.
Absolutely. And that
Yeah,
comes up a
I know.
lot.
I was gonna say I work on like 80% period set television shows, and editors are like so used to being able to get instrumentals. They'll be like, "Can I get an instrumental for that like 50 song? It would be so great." And I like the amount of times I say the phrase, "We're happy to ask." However, vintage tracks very rarely have instrumentals.
Live off the floor was a thing. Yes.
Oh my gosh, never. Yeah. But it kind of just did the last to piggyback on what everybody's saying. I mean, it really comes down to again, like collaboration again, and that like there are a lot of, you know, even as the music supervisor, there are so many cooks in the kitchen. Like you're saying, like the editors will have their own opinions, the showrunner will have their own opinions, and so sometimes you get to write those like super long things and you're like, oh, it's going to be this and this and this, and everyone's like super excited and receptive. But then sometimes it's like you're just like, okay, well, that's everyone's really, all the other like 5 opinions around you are like really excited about how something else works, and you're like, cool, yep, that was what I was gonna say. Yes. So it's just like it's all collaborative, and there are a lot of opinions to navigate more often than not.
So true.
There you go. Zach, let's hear the story for Everybody by Black Box and how that ended up in the series. And we were saying before this started how, you know, it's been stuck in our head ever since.
It's the best song. So normally I would be on set just goofing off, sitting in Video Village, eating all the craft services. But because of COVID, this was shot, believe it or not, and this is a testament to how good our production designer, Amy Williams, is. That's all on a stage. She built the interiors of that house. So that was all in London, and we could only bring a certain amount of people from the US over there. And my ticket was lost in the mail, I guess. But as a way to kind of like be there while not being there, I was making mixes. And because that stereo, as I mentioned earlier, is very operational, that was on the set. So I'd make these mixes, like I'd make daytime ones and nighttime ones, of just music that kind of made sense to me for the characters, but also, most importantly, stuff that I knew wouldn't be tricky for my co-supervisor, Carrie Druten, to clear if any of it kind of crept its way into the show itself. And Everybody is one of those instances. Like Aziz was just grabbing a shot of them doing laundry, which was gonna just be silent, but that song was playing on the stereo in the other room, and Naomi and Lena just started dancing to it. And Aziz is like, this is great, like roll on this. And so as he's rolling on it, I'm getting frantic texts like, will this clear? Will this clear? It's looking really good. And then I'm asking Carrie, and yeah, it all worked out. But there's a couple diegetic things in this season that happened that way. They were truly playing in the house. and we kept him.
Yeah, there you go. That's the story of everybody, and how it got to be the earworm that it is, and you know, it's just a throwback. But Alex and Brienne and Amanda, I'd love to hear, you know, all your shows had composers like working alongside them and just finding that balance too between not just the silence but also music and the score, like how that works. Brienne, you want to start with that?
Sure. Yeah. We had a wonderful composer. We actually had two composers on this show, and it's a lot of working together. I feel like that's such a great relationship when you have a great relationship with a composer, where the things you're pulling can inform what they're doing, and what they're doing can inform, you know, decisions you're making. And it does have to feel really seamless. I think that that's such an important shorthand to have with someone, that you can just understand, okay, these are the instruments they're using, or these are the instruments that are informing, you know, the character's sound for these scenes. And that really needs to fit into what you're doing as a music supervisor. So yeah, Chris Allen Lee was our prominent sort of first composer, and he was just incredible, especially, you know, when we're working with budgetary restrictions and we have to get rid of pieces, and he's coming, you know, they come to save the day sometimes, and that's just so important. And it's such a great relationship to have.
Alex, talk about working with Chris Bowers, who's the composer on Bridgerton.
I was just thinking all of us had the chance to work with such great composers, and you know, in this room we're so lucky. Chris and I had worked on a show. It was my second time getting to work with Chris. We worked on a show called For the People, very different musically, but he was obviously so talented. He brought so much to Bridgerton, and you know, started writing some of the main themes of the series before we even shot the first scene. So he was already thinking about it. He was conceptualizing. I think more than anything, it was important for the source to highlight Chris's score. How would it be seamless, and how would we sort of get out of the way when it was time for Chris to really do the storytelling? And I know that was important to the showrunner. And I could go on about his adventures recording the score remotely in COVID, which were an epic lift. And I'll save that for another panel, but he did an unbelievable job.
And Amanda, you got to work with Nathan Barr on Halston.
I love him.
Frequent collaborator. Talk about balancing, you know, in his score.
Yeah, you know, we like the score and the songs kind of operated like we worked separately in most of the time, and we're sort of doing our own things. I mean, I know Nate, like the schedule on Halston was quite insane, and he was like furiously doing cues and like sending things editorial in New York, and it was quite a difficult show to tone from what I, you know, was privy to, and like were part of those conversations, and finding that balance between like speaking to the period without like really leaning into the period and being like, we're doing a 70s score, and like that was something nobody really wanted to do. And one of the kind of sonic touch points overall kind of became like the Danger Mouse and Karen O album, yes, it was that album that like was really a sonic touch point and really inspired a lot, not just, I think, a little bit of the score and a little bit of the songs and the approach to it. And Nate is just such a pro, and like we work together in those moments where it was like we need to have a solve. We need to solve either a budget issue or whatever. And so in those moments, Nate and I would sort of talk about like what's possible for you, can we pull this off? But like he's just always been a dream to work with. I mean, since The Americans, I've gotten the pleasure to work with Nate a few times, and it's been really fun to like have him in the Ryan Murphy family and like get to work on a few of these projects. And he's just so talented and just such a great personality to have in the mix, because as I think we all know, that's personality is like very important in all things. And yeah, I mean, he was just a dream, and the score I think came out really, it was like a labor of love from him, from everybody involved. And I think it turned out really well, and it definitely got there and really added a dimension to the show that I think really did complement the songs that ended up in there, and what we did with the songs.
Yeah. And Alex, I'm going to ask you, because I've seen it show up in the chat, that people want to know about Bridgerton season 2. If you started thinking about the music, like how early you're doing it, and where you are, if you're even allowed to talk about it.
Justin Camps is going to take over music supervision on season 2. So I'm sure he's going to have a lot to talk about as far as direction, but I think we know the Bridgerton world.
There you go. So you heard it here first. And I know we have a few, aspiring music supervisors. So whilst I have you, I'm sure they would love to know, any tips you have for, getting their foot through the door. Like, what's the piece of advice you would give them? Alex, let's pick up with you.
I'd love to go last.
Right, okay.
I'll do a quick one here. A thing that I can't stress enough to everybody who asks about this job is, you don't know what this world is going to be until you start seeing these scripts. So the more music that you're familiar with, the more you've studied, the better you're going to do at this job. And a lot of people come to me, they're like, oh, I want to be a music supervisor because, I'm this DJ. It's like, well, it's more than that, because it's I am a DJ, but what I play to a club has nothing to do with what I do on screen. Our job is to kind of be like a quality filter for the best idea to support these stories. So the more music you know and the more history you know, the better you're going to do. I fell into this job, by the way. Like I came from record labels and record collecting and DJing. But since I was a kid, I tried to teach myself something about music every day. And if there was a genre that I didn't understand, I'd start to study it. And unbeknownst to me, that was the skill set that it took to do these jobs. And
yeah.
Classical music's a perfect example. Like that was the one that was just so overwhelming to me, because I'm not a musician. But I kind of recognized it was my weak spot. So I've been studying it for the last 10 years. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have known how to do this season, because the Jesse Norman idea I came up with just worked. And I know the classical repertoire now. So I was able to throw all that stuff in there without really deep diving, It was already in my head.
Yeah.
That's my...
Well, Brienne, I'd love to hear from you, because you did such an incredible job with Emily in Paris and finding all these incredible French artists. It's almost like, where's that Spotify playlist? I need to have everybody.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. It is a fun playlist. For me, in terms of advice and just, what I think the job is really about. I think for me, it's always about world building. And that's, it's getting into the heads of the characters and understanding the scripts in a way where you're thinking, what would they be listening to? What do we want people to think they'd be listening to? What would they actually be? There's a lot of layers to things. And I think it's always just about really trying to understand the psyche of the characters and the entire sphere of that universe that you're spending time in. I think it's just so important to try to, pinpoint those different perspectives and try to capture them in a way that feels whole, because it can't just be one element that you're diving into. It has to really capture a lot of different areas and perspectives of that world. So I would say world building is my advice. Focus on the world building.
Yeah. Amanda, what about for you? I mean, you know, the soundtrack to Halston was a killer. You know, everybody, again, same thing. Like, talk about, you know, the advice you would give to somebody trying to get into the world of music supervision.
So someone trying to get in the door of supervision, I think learn as much as humanly possible. Because if there's one thing I've learned in doing this job for 10 years is that it's like different every day. And I like sometimes wish I could go back and work for like Zach or Brie and be like, oh man, I wish I could just like shadow you for a day and like I feel like there's every day something new coming up. And I do feel like a lot of people sometimes start in the job and do it or like work in some capacity for a year or 2 years. And they're like, I got it. I'm ready. Just give me the shot. Give me the shot on the big show. I'm so ready for it. And like, I want to just be like, hold on, like, let's like, just there's, well, mostly I look at it, I'm like, how do you feel that way? Because I feel like every day I'm still learning something new. And like, it goes to, you know, what Zach is saying musically, but also just in terms of like process in the job. Like, for me, it's like everything from clearing songs to how to do an on camera to like the questions that supervisors get thrown at, like, every day. It's like something I'm like, I don't know that. And just being able to say like, gosh, I still have a lot to learn, and wanting to learn it and being okay, like saying like, okay, I'm gonna learn this new skill. I'm gonna find someone who can answer my question. I think that and being open for that to be a journey too. And like the idea that maybe your dream job is working for a supervisor, but you know, maybe that's not available, and being like, okay, well, I'm going to go over to the publishing side and learn everything I can about this catalog and how to do this job. Okay, well, maybe this is, you know, I'm going to try to go to here. I mean, that's what I did. I made so many lateral moves to get to where I am along the way. And fun fact, Alex, I don't know if I've even mentioned this, I met you at the Chuck rap party because my husband was a PA in like 20, whatever it was. And I was like, should I go talk to Alex? She's the music supervisor. I think I was working at Lionsgate or something like that. And I like was like, hi, I'm just so interested in this and like all of this stuff. So and just I think that you just have to be wanting to learn as much as you can and being okay with that. There'll be always a lot to learn. And then just like following your journey, because you never know what that next thing that you went to because you wanted to learn this other thing will like get you, and being okay that it could take a little time. Like that would be my like the sum of advice for people who want to get into field, because it's a journey for sure, but just keep learning new skills and new music, and you know, hopefully it'll, you know, you'll get somewhere.
I just saw a question that someone said, what do you do when you get stumped as a music supervisor? And I was just going to say, Amanda and I call each other a lot with like, not a lot, but like every once in a while, you know, it's nice to have resources that like people you really can trust to be like, have you ever dealt with this situation? Or have you ever experienced this? It's just really nice to have that support in people that you can trust and call. And I hope I get to be that for other people as well, that it's, you know, it's just nice to have people that you can turn to, because no one knows all the answers all the time. We're, like she said, we're always learning.
Always learning.
And I would just add, gosh, so many profound thoughts to chew on here, is how important it is to really connect to the scripts. My advice to people that are still in school and still like trying to decide how it is you get there is like lit classes, all the lit classes you can ingest, because as part of that creative team that support the showrunner or director, the production designer, right, the cinematographer, that team, you are bringing that creator's vision to life, and you have to really be able to relate to the material. And I think, you know, references are important, sort of literary references, and of course the musical references. And so that part of this job doesn't get talked about quite as much because of course we're talking about the music, but the music comes to life because what's on that page is coming to life.
If I could add to that too, study your film history. You know, every group of collaborators has a different shorthand. On Master of None, we just throw film references at each other.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no excuse these days to not knowing the greats. Like, if everybody watching doesn't have a Criterion account, go get one and just start studying. A lot of the best ideas have already been done, and we've got a lot we can learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Best piece of advice right there. If you don't have a Criterion account, go out and get one. Study the classics.
Tease gives me one for Christmas every year.
Love that. You guys all had great ideas. That was
Also, that lit knowledge helps with clearing songs. People always think it's paperwork, but I come from like writing background, and I use it every day in writing emails and scene descriptions. Always. My fiction background comes in handy. Learn
There
it.
you go.
Love it.
Great. Such great tips. Such great tips to close out our conversation. Alex, Amanda, Zach, Brienne, Guild of Music Supervisors, and Joel, and of course Netflix. Thank you so much for that conversation. So many great tips.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
this
you.
was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
That was awesome.
Did we turn this off?
I don't know. What do we do now?
What are we
You're
doing,
done.
Joel?
Go about your business. Thank you.
Are we done? We're done.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Chaz.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.